Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Healthy, Fit, and Pain-Free podcast. I am your host, Dr. Tyler. Accompanying me is, again, my beautiful wife, Nina. Hello, Nina.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, for this episode, this is episode 38, and this is a question that comes up a lot among not just members, but people in general, and it is the best shoes to conquer your workout. So, I brought Nina on for this because I thought this would be really good to get someone who is an active person and has a really good outsider perspective on buying shoes, and then me professionally, having a little bit of experience with that. But we'll get to that a little bit later. How's your week going, Nina?
Going good. Yeah, I'm glad it's the weekend.
Yeah. So, depending on when this hits you, this is a Friday evening.
Yep.
My wife and I are sitting in front of a fire with a microphone. So,
And our dogs.
And our dogs. So, kudos to my wife for doing this on a Friday evening instead of a date night, like maybe some would do. But what's the fun in that, right?
Right.
So what's new this week?
Well, not a whole lot. Little man, Rhett said I love you.
Ah, that's right. He did say I love you.
To you.
To me.
And to me yesterday. You just weren't home for it.
Of course, she took that away from me as quick as she could. Yeah.
He also, what else has he been doing? Just loving Encanto.
Ah, yes, Encanto.
We've probably watched it 24 times.
Nina's watched it probably 24 times. I've watched it probably 10 times at this point. So
the music's good, though.
It is, yes. For those of you who haven't watched Encanto on Disney Plus, it's good. It's entertaining.
It is really good. The colors and he also likes to pick out his shoes, which leads us into a, good.
Ah, it does. Yeah.
I like saying, let's go pick out your shoes. And he goes and picks out what shoes he wants to wear for the day.
So I do like that segue. However, it is, I wanted to say real quick, it is funny with Disney Plus how he's really picking up on the Moana and the Encanto. So he's definitely getting in more into the cultural. So that's good. Our son is becoming culturally diverse at a year and a half old. So
yeah.
But also, again, loves to choose his shoes, which is a great segue into today's episode. So to really, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but to really dive in on why I wanted to cover this is because, at our gym, there's both of our gyms now. Some women are really, and men, but some of our members are really picking up on a good type of shoe wear. But there's others that, not going to lie, it does leave a little bit of a hideous spike in the back of my neck when I see what they're wearing. And a lot of them ask questions too on what is the best shoe wear. And, unfortunately, a lot of times it comes up to personal preference with people, which isn't a bad thing. And we'll dive into that a little bit later. But, it's really about, we should dive into what the science says as far as science. I say science. Kind of what the science says and what research says as far as like the best shoes to wear for what.
Yeah.
So Nina, you're a runner, you're a marathon runner, you're a half marathon runner. And I know you've had your plethora of attempts at shoes. So tell me a little bit about your experience with shoes. I definitely want to gain this from like a Gen Pop type of perspective before we really dive into like the nitty gritty of shoe buying.
Sure. Well, I started off with Asics when I first ran, then went to Brooks, then New Balance, and most recently back to Brooks. But I guess like what I'm, as a runner, what I'm looking for in a shoe is being supportive, especially running a marathon. It's 26 miles. I just need something support. I feel like I'm looking for something supportive and comfortable, and it's not going to give me blisters pretty much.
So for those out there, because supportive can kind of have 1,000 roles. So to you, what exactly does supportive mean?
I guess it just means like I don't want my feet to hurt after I'm running. That's what supportive means to me.
Okay. So what about during your run? Like, what does supportive mean to you?
I guess it means like running on like having a cushion between you and the ground.
Okay.
But honestly, like I feel like I don't even feel my feet or think about them when I'm running, but that's a good thing to me.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like you prefer a different shoe compared to like a 5K to a half marathon to a marathon, or do you feel like it's kind of all the same?
It's probably all the same only because I usually like have a pair of running shoes and that's what I specifically use for running. Like I don't use it for anything else.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, with that, why do you feel like your opinion has changed throughout the past couple years as far now I say couple years. No, we've been dating for 11 years. We've been married for 6 years almost.
Mhm.
Oh, man, off the side of my hip on that one.
Yeah.
Um, so within that time, I mean, that's a lot of that's a good bit of years of experience as far as like picking shoes. How do you
Yeah.
feel like things have changed throughout the years?
Well, I just feel like when I first started running, I didn't really know what I was looking for. And then as I got into running more, I heard about Brooks a lot. So that's kind of why I went that way. And I was there for years and years.
Hmm.
And then, every company changes their shoes, tweaks them a little bit each year. So then you kind of fall away from that. And then I got in a New Balance because two of my girlfriends ran in them. So I just was kind of like, oh, let me try these out. And then I ended up liking them. So
Sure.
that's kind of how my changes went. It wasn't really anything in particular, but I think I got, you have a shoe like that you really like and then it changes. So then you kind of like, let's see if there's something else out there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's funny how that works because a lot of times, the shoe industry specifically is can be very referral based. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times like, granted there's like runner's world and social media to where people can now granted we're talking about just running shoes right now. There's, other types of shoes you can pick from, but as far as like what type of genre, if you will, when it comes to sports. But I mean, when it comes to running, a lot of times it is referral based, and that's not a bad thing at first.
Yeah.
I think where the issue comes in though is again, and we always talk about this with our members. It's a longevity game.
Yeah.
It's not so much just about how you feel right now. It's not about how you perform right now, but it's about laying a good foundation so that 10, 20, 30 years down the road, you're still able to perform at the same amount without having any type of drawback. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's not, but I guess too with running, it's not just your shoes. It's also how you run. Like you're saying longevity too.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I do mean that as far as like running gait goes. I guess what I really mean is, picking the best shoes for you, not just what feels good at the moment. But yeah,
Yeah. Oh, and
no,
not hurting your joints.
sure. But yeah, there's definitely also a conditioning standpoint. There's a strength training standpoint, nutritional standpoint, obviously, and recovery standpoint. That all these things definitely encompass running. And again, I don't want to make this podcast all about running, but that's obviously like a big part of it as far as when it comes to shoes.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like you know, I'll end up, I said I don't use my running shoes for anything else, but sometimes I'll end up using my older running shoes for like lifting and stuff like that. But I don't really have any like specific lifting shoes, but I know that you do. So like what kind of shoes do you recommend for that?
Sure. So, I mean, there's kind of there's definitely a nuanced approach to everything. And before I go into like lifting shoes, I want to go into running shoes a little bit too, because I feel like people kind of don't understand running shoes specifically as far as like what they do and what exactly shoes do in general. Um, so we'll go into a few categories here. The first is what we call like a plush shoe, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And this is typically like if you look at a company, they'll have a quote unquote signature foam based technology. So, to give you some ideas, so like Saucony's has the Ultra Boost technology, New Balance has their Fresh Foam. Asics has their gel cushioning. Hoka's has their ProFly. Brooks has their DNA Loft type of. And so all these companies have these quote unquote foams or cushioning. And really this is representing the plush side of things. And what plush really means is, I mean, we've all experienced this. If you lay on a really soft bed that you just like fall into, it's like a cloud. That's a plush bed.
Right.
However, like some prefer, I hate to say it, like a dorm room or a hotel bed where you like fall on it.
It's like a brick.
Yeah, and it just doesn't move at all.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how shoes are. And so like with plush, for instance, people and Hoka's are a good example of. I always use Hoka's as an example because people always use Hoka's. But if you look at Hoka's, like they have a very big stack as far as like underneath their shoe, a very big, thick plush cushioning.
Yeah.
And even like I had a pair of Ultras, excuse me, that I ran my the marathon that you and I ran together in. And they're very like cushion thick shoes, and that's what's so nice about them is they're very nice. It's very soft. You feel like you can do it forever. Like it's just a very comforting feel.
I forgot you ran those.
Yeah, my Ultras.
Yeah,
I love those shoes. If I was running straight.
Yeah.
I always tell people if I had to make a turn in those shoes, it was like a very wide turn. I felt very unstable.
It's funny.
Now at the same point, and granted, like I know we're talking about running shoes here, but this works with walking shoes, but this is also kind of transfers over into workout shoes as well. But so then you have another side of the equation, which, every company has their own word for it, but this is the more reactive or like the more energetic shoe. And so what this is a shoe where companies will have like a carbon fiber plate in it. And what that does is that carbon fiber plate, it creates a rebounding effect with the shoe, but also makes it light enough to where it's very responsive.
Yeah.
So, like Hoka has their Carbon X. Again, like Hoka really tries to delve into both realms here, but they're very much more the plush side of things. But, people like their Hoka. So Nike is a huge one with this. Like Nike has their Vaporfly, which is probably one of the top running shoes. Now, granted, this running shoe is over $200. So
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if Brooks, like their launch, would fall into this category.
So we'll dive into Brooks here in a second, but yeah, it's fairly like in that realm. Asics, they have a shoe that's kind of in this realm. Saucony and Adidas, Adidas especially. Adidas is more of like a responsive type shoe, but these are going to be like the shoes that you want to run fast in. So these are not the shoes that you run a half marathon or a marathon. And
so now, like a 5K.
Yeah. Now, granted, the Nike Vaporflies, like they're very popular on elite. So, like elite athletes, sure, they'll use these shoes because they want to run fast.
Sure.
And they're very efficient. So they don't really care about plush.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like these shoes also, because they're so reactive, takes a lot of energy. I mean, these shoes are typically lighter.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of energy in the fact they don't have a rollover. So a lot of like companies that promote plush shoes, like they promote the rollover effect of it. So as soon as you land, it rolls you over into the next one. I call bullshit when I think about the rollover.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how it is as far as, the carbon side of things goes. So, and I mean, and like you mentioned, there's like the middle road. So this is more of the Brooks. This is more of the I would even say Asics too.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
And actually, I completely forgot to mention New Balance throughout all this. Even throughout my research.
No, you did the first thing.
Oh yeah. They're Fresh Foam. New Balance, I would say too, is kind of a little bit in the middle of the road, depending. But yeah, so Asics, Brooks, and then New Balance are really good because they tend to try to mix cushioning with responsiveness. And so they do a decent job. Brooks, I would say, so typically with people, I hate doing this, where I used to work at an area I used to work at, and there was a doctor there that every single patient that would come in, he would tell them to
Brooks.
just go by Brooks.
Yeah.
And it was annoying as hell to me. Now, granted, Brooks are very supportive. Like, that's kind of what Brooks goes off of, is like they have, so to go off on this tangent. So Brooks has what's called, and other companies do too, don't get me wrong, but Brooks will use what they call like a medial wedge. And what this means basically is, if you look at the back of the shoe, like where the heel is at, there's going to be kind of like a wedge on the inside of the shoe, and some even on the outside of the shoe, because what this wedge does is it prevents your foot from crashing in, and then your knee from crashing in.
Interesting.
So, and then some also have a lateral post, what they call a lateral post too. And so that'll keep you from crashing out or from you rolling your ankle.
I did not know this.
Yeah. And so so people will typically, when they're buying shoes that they want more support in, that's what they'll say, like, I want more support. Two things come into factor. One is that the forefoot portion is wider, and like the toe box is bigger. So the toe box is that area around like from your midfoot.
Ball of your foot.
Yeah, the ball of your foot. It's wider, and you want that because, the opposite of that is high heels for females, obviously, or males,
whatever,
depending on what your preference is.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
But that V-shaped toe is very bad for your feet. So you want something that's very wide, so it allows your toes to spread out and splay out as you run.
I like that.
Yeah. Like most people do.
Toe. Yeah.
And so that, combined with the wedges on the back end, helps to give the shoe more stability, so you don't roll in or out. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So that's kind of, that's where that's where like a Brooks, New Balance has that a little bit, Asics has that a little bit. That's kind of where I would recommend them to be middle of the road.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of just go buy those and not be too knowledgeable about what you're getting, and you'll typically have a decent shoe coming out of it.
Yeah, they all, all of theirs, I feel like Adrenaline, Ghost, Launch, Glycerins, I think they're called, most supportive are good. But
yeah, so but yeah, so to go into your question too about like workout shoes. So what have you tried workout shoes wise?
I think honestly the only thing I tried was like I think they're the Metcons, the Nike Metcons.
When did you have a pair of Metcons?
When you did. I still have them. I don't know where they are.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And that's like the only pair of like actually like lifting shoes I ever got.
How'd you like them?
I liked them. They were definitely like flatter. Like the bottom was flatter, like for like lifting, like squatting and deadlifts and stuff. They were nice, but that's literally the only pair I've ever had.
Yeah.
For more specifically for lifting. And I don't even know why I got them. Probably because you did.
Maybe. I can't remember if I had them before you did or not.
I don't know. I think we got them at the same time.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like you did better in them?
But I was also doing different working out then too.
Yeah.
Like I was going to a gym more often, whereas now I work out more at home.
True.
With Red.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, with workout shoes, it's way more difficult. Difficult in the fact is, like, with workouts, working out, it's a very complex scenario, right? Like, running is running.
Yeah.
Walking is walking. But working out, you're doing 1,000 different things in one session. So,
yeah.
So this is where it gets a little bit interesting as far as workout shoes go, because you have so many things come into play. So workout shoes, just like what we were talking about earlier with the very responsive shoes, they have a carbon and a guard plate. Not all of them do, but some definitely mention that they have this. And this is basically just, they create a foundation in the sole of the shoe to where it creates stability, and it also prevents the sole from like collapsing at all.
Makes sense.
So, for instance, not that I want to throw companies out here, but there, a few specific ones. So, especially at our gym, like at our gym, No Bulls is a big one. Now, that's also because one of our coaches is a big promoter of No Bulls, but
I still need a pair. I don't have one.
pair of No Bulls.
Yeah.
Um, and they're like I have two pairs. One is a work pair because they work pairs and like they're a nice pair and they look nice. The other pair is a pair of workout. It's a workout pair, and I like them. But again, when it comes to working out, it depends on what you want to do with them.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned with your Metcons, squat, deadlift, but like that's it.
Yeah.
I remember
because they were really flat.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't run in them.
No. And I remember like 6 years ago, I had on my Metcons and I was at a CrossFit gym that you and I are a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a WOD, which is a workout of the day. And the part of the WOD was, what was I doing that day? I was doing a big workout. And it was like a mile run. No, it wasn't that. It was a half-mile run between each circuit. And I was running, and I severely rolled my ankle, and I actually got a grade 2 sprain of my ankle. I finished the workout.
Of course you did.
But I definitely paid for it later. Now, I'm not going to blame the shoes for that, but, definitely comes into play there.
Mm-hmm.
But, so with with all of these shoes, there's going to be some sort of like plate, carbon plate, guard plate, fabric plate, whatever you want to insert here, that gives stability for you to do like squatting, minor jumping, lunging, stuff like that. Yeah. Maybe even you could say deadlifting. However, I argue that a lot of times these shoes actually have a lift in the heel to help you with squatting because most people don't have ankle mobility.
Yeah.
So there will be a lift in the heel, and then it helps you again to squat and stuff more. But then that actually gives you a deficit with deadlifts
because your heel's lifted.
Yes. And a deadlift is more of a heel down type of motion.
You want it to be flat.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that's kind of where the issue is. But again, but you can't jump, you can't run.
Right.
Which again, these shoes are considered cross trainers.
Right.
So if they can't cross train, then it's like, meh.
What do you have them for?
Yeah. For sure. So to kind of go through like different ones. So like No Bulls, like I said, they have a carbon plate. They're very durable. That's actually one of the things that they're very well known for because of their upper, which is the fabric that goes over the top of your foot. It's very durable.
That's good.
However, the issue with that is too that me personally, I've come across, but I've read about this too, is that comfort kind of lacks because it is so durable.
Yeah.
We go back to running shoes, like a lot of running shoes now are adopting the like knit.
I hate them, but yeah.
Why do you hate them?
I just don't like the sock thing.
You don't? Wow. What about like over your toes though?
I guess. Yeah.
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 So yeah, and that's always a drawback, right?
Mm-hmm.
What don't you like about the sock thing?
I don't know. I don't feel like it supports my ankle. It's like a sock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't understand.
So, and this is the thing too that people don't quite understand with exercise in general or like a workout program is when you add comfort, you reduce stability.
Yeah.
And that's like the problem that comes into play here is you can't really have stability and comfort all in the same thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like with No Bull is they last a long time. They're fairly stable, but yeah, the comfort's not quite there, especially if you're someone like me who has Tyrannosaurus toes that drive through the top of the shoe. Other shoes you can think about are like Reebok. Like Reebok is very well known. They're a part of the CrossFit Games, or at least used to, from what I understand. So like they have a good shoe for cross training. Innovate is a company, but they're more what's called minimalist. So minimalist for those of you out there, minimalist means there's a very minimal, like, so there's a thing called toe drop or heel
Yeah.
drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, heel toe drop. And basically that is the amount of drop or inches drop between your heel and your toes.
Yeah.
So a lot of running shoes, Brooks is well known for this. And then New Balance kind of is too, but basically the heel drop's a little bit higher. So you're going to be a little bit more of like the 12 millimeter. So it's like 10 to 12 millimeters. However, things like Hoka's, for instance, always try to really reduce that to like 4 millimeters. And the closer to 0 you get, the more the shoe is flat. So that means you get no propulsion. And basically the height from your heel to your toe is pretty much the same. And the reason for this is because we want to adapt a barefoot approach to life.
I never knew that about the toe drop thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you want to have like so that's what they're shooting for. And so like Innovate and even New Balance has a minimalist line, and that's what their attempt is to have a very minimal space from your heel to your toe as far as height goes. And again, this is to adapt a barefoot type of approach to what you do. Now, there was a book that came out years ago. I can't think of the name of the book now. I'm blanking on it right now, but it was a book all about running without shoes, barefoot running. And whenever
is that where what shoes do you have that are like barefoot? Toes.
Oh, my Vibrams.
Yeah. Is that where that
my
came
fine
from?
figure. No.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, kind of, but no.
Okay.
But so this book came out and basically encouraged everybody they should run barefoot, and then people ran barefoot, and then of course what happened is half the population developed foot injuries because they shouldn't have been running barefoot. So
well, that yeah.
So when we'll kind of cover that a little bit later, but other company, yeah, like I said, Reebok, they're part of the CrossFit brand. They typically try to have a cross trainer shoe. Innovate's more of a minimalist. Nike, so we both mentioned our Metcons. They're a workout shoe. However, I argue that if you're not squatting or
deadlifting,
that's really it in them.
Oh yeah, because even the deadlifting, you said.
Yeah. They're not really that great of shoes. They feel like bricks when you run.
Oh yeah.
And then, there's other, so even, you have to kind of take your trade-offs here. So like Nikes, for instance, my favorite pair of shoes to ever work out in
was the blue Nikes.
Was my blue. You remember those, don't you?
Because I bought them for you.
Yeah, you did. That's right, you did. I had a pair of blue Nikes, and these were my favorite shoes to work out in. I don't even remember what they were.
They were literally from Kohl's, I think.
Ugh, that hurts. They were my favorite shoes to work out in, though, because they were light, they were comfortable, they lasted a long time, and they were just exactly what I wanted in a shoe. Now, granted, I wanted a shoe that could do everything, and I would not trust to squat heavy weight in those shoes. But again, they would do everything. But
Paisley wanted to give her input on the shoes.
Yeah, Paisley, our golden doodle, came up here, and she's all about talking about shoe wear right now.
Okay.
But and again, with lifting shoes, there's other approaches you can take. So, there's what they call lifting shoes for those of you out there. And these are definitely more of a niche shoe. These are for those who are power lifters or weightlifters or stuff like that. So, like Nike, Reebok, Adidas, they all three have a weightlifting shoe. Typically has a Velcro strap with them. Do not get these, most of you. Again, these are more for like competitive people. They have a very, very, very thick hard plate in them. They have a very elevated heel because that's what they're made for. And they literally cannot be used for anything else.
Jeez.
And then, if you look out there, you'll see some that wear Vans
Converse.
or Converse.
Chucks.
Chuck Taylors. these shoes, reason being why they wear they're very flat shoes. Again, this kind of comes back to that very little toe drop or
Mm-hmm.
heel toe drop. And so people tend to enjoy these because they're closer to the ground. But yeah, again, it's really about personal variability, but then you also have to really you have to try things out and do your research before you choose them. So
Sure. Yeah. With anything, but yeah.
yeah, for sure. So, Nina, where do you feel like the biggest challenge is when it comes to choosing a shoe, figuring out what shoe to choose from, or even like other referrals or recommendations?
Um, I think the biggest challenge is like wherever you go, to be honest, like because you're gonna go into a certain store and whoever you talk to is gonna have a certain preference of shoe. Like unless you go into like I don't honestly I don't even know, but I always feel like when I go somewhere like people are trying to just sell me a shoe. Because I remember going most recently and I was asking about the New Balances. I used to run in the Fresh Foam Bongos, which are barely carried in store. Um, so I was like, well, I want to try the Brooks Adrenaline. And I had a salesperson that was like, well, you should try the New Balances, the 1080s, I think it was. And I'm like, well, I don't like that's totally different than the Bongo. Like, I don't and I've ran adrenalines before. Like, I really want to try those. And like, he was just kind of trying to push that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I didn't like the feel of them because it had like the back that like is now hard, like that heel that's harder. Whereas the Brooks, I feel like they kind of went back to like their older style, which is I liked, and that's why I went back to them. So I think the biggest issue I have is just I don't know, by like going to someone that's non-biased because everyone's biased about what shoes they like, which is understandable.
Sure. Yeah. And so for those of you out there who are not members, so I say this with complete unbiased. So like we have a partnership with one store, Pro Bike and Run in the Pittsburgh area. And they're great. Like they're awesome for shoe recommendations, for bike recommendations, stuff like that. And I went to them because we were going to run the turkey trot together in Thanksgiving, and I needed a new pair of running shoes. And me and running shoes don't get along very well. I'm very
You've never
particular.
really found a pair you like.
Actually, that's not true.
Hmm.
The Brooks.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. But then, do they even make them anymore?
No, they don't. They're discontinued.
Yeah.
The shoot pro something.
Proform? I don't know. I can't remember what they're called.
It really hurts right now that I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah,
Those were my
your favorite
shoes. Yeah.
I don't know if they're your favorite then.
Oh, they were. Pure Forms.
That's right.
Brooke Pure Form.
Yeah.
Pure
See?
Forms.
I had form right.
Yeah. But those were my favorite shoes that I've ever had. But anyhow, so it's been very hard for me to find a pair of running shoes. So I went to Pro Bike and Run, and Chris, who's the manager, him and I have a great relationship at Robinson location, and then one of their affiliates, like we literally went through a million shoes before we found like what was good for me.
Yeah.
And it's tough because obviously like they only have certain brands that they carry, and you only have certain brands that that you like.
Right.
And so it becomes a problem.
For sure.
So what I really recommend with people who are looking for shoes is, for one, like really understand with the shoes that you currently have is what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're someone who has a very wide, foot, or a very wide forefoot, that you really like, you have to look for something that has a wide toe box.
Yeah.
And you should go into every shoe store, and as soon as they ask like, what do you want, the first thing being like, I want a wide toe box. Because unfortunately, you don't really know what kind of shoe store you're going into.
No.
You could go into like a Pro Bike and Run, who they know what they're talking about.
Right.
Or you could go into Kohl's, and get someone who's just like has no idea
Here's
what they're
the
doing.
shoe. Yeah.
Here's a shoe. So that's one thing you need to understand. The other is understanding like what exactly is your preference. And this could be a running shoe, a walking shoe, a workout shoe, but are you looking for support? Are you looking for comfort? Or are you looking for response? So if you're someone who's looking for comfort, that's where like a plush model will come in, like we talked about, originally. And that's where like a thicker foam comes into play.
Yeah.
Granted, if you're looking to run or walk, okay, I get it. If you're looking to walk, definitely. If you're looking to run, I always question the plush model, but again, it's up to you.
Yeah.
If you're looking to work out, do not
do that.
Choose a plush model.
Yeah.
Because then it makes your foot so
kind of unsteady.
What's that?
Unsteady?
Yes. Yeah. So actually there is research out there that shows that plush type shoes actually makes your foot more unstable. And so if that instability will work against you, obviously with like a squat or something like that.
Should probably stop working out my Brooks, my running shoes.
Yes, you probably should. Get your Metcons back.
Yes.
Out. And then, but if you're someone who wants more of a reactive or energetic shoe, that's exactly what you should look for. You should look for something that has a little bit less of a heel toe drop, doesn't really have much of that foam, that thickness, and something that has more of a carbon fiber plate, because that's, and that's someone like me. So, I'm a bigger guy, but when I run, I like a reactive response to my shoe. So that's typically what I look for.
Yeah.
So that should be something you definitely look for. Now, if you're someone who is like, I feel like my foot collapses all the time. If you went to plenty of people and they say, you have your foot, you have a horribly medial collapse and your foot need more of a stability shoe. Well, then you should maybe look at a Brooks or an Asics or something like that, where someone can actually look at your foot and say, like, you need this type of stability with it, because that's going to be like a medial post, typically, sometimes a lateral post, just to see what exactly is important. But realize that technology only goes so far. And this is where you have to also train yourself. So don't rely your foot progress on your shoe. You need to actually make sure that your foot gets stronger by itself, that you do what's necessary to make your entire lower extremity and even your upper extremity strong enough to where it can support you, so that you don't need those shoes anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
So, I know you do this every podcast. So I'm going to ask you, what are your 3 takeaways from this podcast?
So I kind of just went over them, but 3 big takeaways when it comes to shoes. The first thing, and people hate to hear me say this, but if you have a pair of shoes that you bought for under $70, burn them or throw them away.
Oh, okay.
And this is like a shoe to work out in. People hate to hear that, but
what if you get them on a discount?
But where did you get them at a discount at? Is a question. So now, granted, this is going to contradict what just we talked about earlier. But so like people don't realize this. So like a Kohl's or something like that. So companies like Nike or Adidas, they actually make a lower quality shoe and they sell to those stores.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So your favorite shoe is low quality, is what you're saying?
Apparently. But like companies like Nike or that typically make a lower quality shoe that they sell to those stores. Hence why you get the shoe for such a low price.
Makes sense.
That's why places like a Kohl's, a TJ Maxx, or whatever, nothing against those stores, but I'm just using it as an example.
Right.
That's why people are typically like, oh, I got a great deal on these shoes.
Yeah.
Well, it's because you got a lower quality shoe.
Sure.
Now I'm stating this off of research that I heard a few years ago, and also from references that I heard a few years ago. So please don't attack me if you if you data search me and decide to throw me under the bus, but from what I understand, this is definitely the case. Also with that, just understand that, again, anything under $70, even $80 is not a high quality shoe. I say this all the time to our members. I am not a materialistic person.
Mm-hmm.
My wife can verify that I am not
I agree.
materialistic person.
Yeah.
However, I will say, if you are going to spend money on anything, you need to spend money on shoes.
See, that's like me and vitamin C serum.
If you haven't heard, 2 episodes ago, Nina and I talked about skincare.
Yeah.
So, but no, like I feel like with shoes, you really have to invest because technology, research, everything goes into the shoe. And unfortunately, it's the case. Some people want to spend $45 on shoes and get pissed off because they're a horrible shoe, but that's just how it is.
Yeah.
So, so the first piece of advice is you need to invest in your shoe wear. Invest in something that's over $70, $80 and don't buy them from Famous Footwear. Number 2 is figure out what your goal and what you're doing is. So the first thing is, so if you're a runner, you need to figure out if you're going to be a long distance or a short distance. And then from there, figure out, do you want more of a comfortable shoe for long distance, or do you want more of a reactive shoe for short distance and you want to be faster? The same goes for working out. If you're someone who's just buying a shoe to work out, you probably need to look into companies like maybe Nike, Reebok, Innovates. But again, Innovates is very much minimalist, barefoot, I should say. New Balance, but again, New Balance cross trainers are a little bit more minimalist. If you're looking into a shoe to work out, and you need to look into cross training shoes.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, with cross trainer, when you look up cross trainer, this is where you'll get on like New Balance or Nike, you're going to get the $40 dad shoes. I shit you not. If you go on these websites and you look up cross trainers on some of these, you're going to get like the big fluffy white dad shoes.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So you really have to work. You really have to be cautious about this. But again, this is where it comes to an investment. You need to invest at least $70, $80+ into your shoes. So that's the other thing. Is like really figure out what your goal is, and then look into the shoe that you want to get. Now, also, like, in addition to that, research a little bit. So, for instance, Noble. So, like, at our gym, Noble is a big thing, again, because one of our coaches is very much into Noble. And granted, I have 2 pair myself. I think they're decent shoes. However, I would not recommend Noble to most of our members.
Yeah.
Just because they are...
Depending on what they need.
Yeah, depending on what they need. They don't have a lot of support. They are not good for running or anything like that. And then they're a very stiff shoe. For those people out there who need more of a flexibility in their shoe, this is not the one for them. So,
yeah, makes sense.
So that would definitely be. So number 1 is, invest in a certain shoe. Number 2 is figure out what your goal is with a certain shoe. And number 3 for my takeaway would probably be, it's a tough one. Would be, here's a good one. Do not keep your shoe for more than 6 months.
Yeah, that's like how, when you're running, you should only keep your shoe for like so many miles.
Yeah. So this actually, it's funny. This is a good conversation with you and I. So Nina and I always have this conversation because I'm the type, and Nina can vouch for this, that I don't buy anything for a long period of time. And then at one point, it seems like I have to buy 1,000 things at once.
Yep.
And the reason being that is because it all started probably 4 or 5 years ago, especially shoes, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever I finally started making money and I thought I can buy shoes.
Yeah.
But then what happens is I keep those shoes for a long enough time and I don't need to buy shoes for a while. And
you need to buy 3 pairs.
And then 2 years later, need to buy 2 pairs of shoes because and it keeps moving on and
Yep.
on. And so, and the reason being that is because like my foot is strong enough to where I can go long enough with a shoe that's really blowing out, even though I shouldn't do that.
No.
But it's also the fact that I buy enough shoes at the same time to where, so for instance, like running magazine stuff will always, and I agree with this, you should have 2 running shoes at the same time that you constantly go
Switch
between.
out. Yeah.
So that you're not just blowing out one and not another.
Right.
So that being said, you should always, you should never have a shoe for more than 6 months doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you're a nurse or a PA or a doctor or a PT and you're wearing, 1 or 2 shoes every single day, like you need to be changing those up like every 6 months.
Yeah, because you're standing on them all day.
Because you're standing on them all day, you're walking on them all day. And granted, like you can change those into running shoes every so often. Like if you're doing a short, like 1.5, 2 mile run.
Yeah.
But you really need to make sure you're changing it. Because I see people all the time who have knee and foot pain who I asked them, I'm like, well, those shoes look old. How long have you had them for? Oh, I've had these for like 1.5 years.
Yeah.
Like, well, no shit, you
Yeah.
have knee or ankle pain. But at the same time, you just really being aware, even if you have shoes that are just for a certain training, just looking at them, making sure that they're not wearing down, making sure there's not a lot of wrinkles, a lot of collapse or anything like that. Pick them up, twist them, flex them, stuff like that, because, and I also realize too, like reactive type shoes, the energized shoes that we talked about earlier that have the plates, they actually won't last as long typically.
Right.
Because they don't have as much buildup.
Makes sense.
However, on the caveat to that, the Plush shoes will also not last as long, but they seem like they will because they have such a foam buildup.
Yeah, they feel like they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
until you put your foot in a new pair and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
It's not really that great anymore.
So actually, Nina brings up a really good point, is that if you're not sure if you should get a new pair or not, put your foot in a new pair of the same shoe, and if you notice a huge difference,
then you gotta get a new pair of shoes.
Yep, tells you something. Because if you have a plush pair of shoes,
It's a tongue twister.
And and you're not really sure. Well, then you're really just putting your faith in a twisted stilt.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, so I know that I was long-winded, but my 3 big takeaways are: for 1, please invest in your shoe wear. For 2, understand your goals and what exactly you want to accomplish with your shoe wear. And number 3, every 6 months, make sure you're rotating your shoe wear. If not every 3, every 3 months. Every 3 months, you could at least buy another pair of shoes to start rotating in, just so not everything is falling apart.
Right, at one time.
Yeah. So, Nina, do you have anything else to take away from this or thoughts on this?
I don't think so. I think you really covered it all.
Cool. Awesome. Well, everyone, this is the Healthy Fit and Fame Free podcast. This is episode 38. I hope you guys got a lot of good notes with this on how to choose the appropriate shoe wear. I know there was a lot thrown at you at this episode. Again, you can always reach out to me at Dr.Tyler_Bordick on social media, or even at Dr.Tyler at InnerStrengthPGH at InnerStrength.com. I would be glad to answer any questions you have with this. But otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in today, and I look forward to seeing you on episode 39. Nina, it was so great having you again today.
Thank you for having me.
Goodbye, everybody.